regrets. So I guess we could start with the one right on top I have here from 1977. This is, I mean, how the hell do you describe this movie? This is from filmmaker Nobuko Obayashi. This is House from 1977. One of the craziest horror movies I've ever seen in my life. And the back of the box, this is one of the best fucking back of the box descriptions ever. How to describe Nobuko Obayashi's indescribable 1977 movie House. As a psychedelic ghost tale, a stream of conscientious bedtime story, an episode of Scooby-Doo directed by one Mario Bava. That's my favorite. It's exactly what this is. This is an episode of Scooby-Doo directed by Mario Bava. Any of the above will do for this hallucinatory head trip about a schoolgirl who travels with 6 classmates to her ailing aunt's creaky country home and comes face to face with evil spirits, a demonic house cat, a bloodthirsty piano, and other ghoulish visions. Yes, House. Now, I go way back with this movie. Back before the pre-COVID days, right? Before COVID. Back in the before COVID days, IFC Center in New York City, they would show midnight movies. And whether it be, actually, people forget this, The Human Centipede, that was a midnight movie shown at the IFC Center. And all these sorts of weird art films. And one night I wanted to go. And so me and a buddy, we went down to the IFC Center and they screened this little movie called House. And I had never seen it, never heard of it. And fucking over the next 88 minutes, my fucking mind was blown all over that midnight theater. And I was like, what a weird film. And then a couple years later, Criterion released this Blu-ray edition. I said, I've got to fucking buy that. I love that movie. And now it's an interesting story as how this got into production before I get into the film itself. The director, he had been almost exclusively a commercial film director his entire life. He directed a lot of commercials and worked with many of the same actresses that star in this film. And at the time he was making these commercials, he was wanting to make a feature-length film. And so he approached the Japanese giants, the Japanese heavyweights known as Toho. Of course, they produced all those famous Godzilla films and horror films. And Toho is like the horror company when it comes to Japan. And this was around the time of about 1974. They were trying to kind of phase Godzilla out of the picture and create some new horror movies. I believe Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla was 74, and then Terror of Mechagodzilla was shortly after that. They knew it was coming to an end, at least the first series of Godzilla films. They wanted to move away from it. And this director came in and he said, hey, I've got an idea for a movie. I want to make a haunted house movie. And they were like, well, unfortunately, man, no offense, but you've only ever directed television commercials. You don't have any real credentials to make a feature-length film. We don't know if we trust you. And we're in desperate need of a hit right now because Godzilla, who is always somebody we can bank on, he's not going to be in the picture very much longer. And they were very hesitant to give a chance and take a chance on an unknown filmmaker. So they turned him down. They turned him down initially, and he went home and was upset and continued to direct TV commercials. A couple years passed by, and they called him back and said, listen, hey, remember that haunted house movie you wanted to do? We don't want to hire you. We don't think the greatest of you. You're not going to be working for Toho. That was what they told him. They didn't think he was worthy of being part of Toho's production company. But we'll finance the movie if you want to film it and go write a script. And so immediately he kind of scrambled, was like, oh my God, I have to come up with something now. Like, this is a big horror studio company. This is my big chance. And he sat down and his mind was complete blank. He didn't know what to do. How do I write a haunted house film? Where do I start? And so he went to his daughter, who was just preteen, I believe 11 or 12 years old. And he said, hey, what scares you? And he sat down with a pen and paper and he wrote down everything she said. And she said, hey, you know what scares me? Not all this bullshit with monsters and Godzillas and all these things. You know what scares me? When I'm pulling up the fucking water from the well out backside and it feels like, I'm not pulling up a watermelon, I'm pulling up a head. Imagine if that was in a movie. He wrote it down, puts it in this movie. Oh, you know what I'm scared of? When I'm playing the piano and that thing just slams. Imagine if it took one of my fingers off. That's in the fucking movie. You know what I'm scared of? My own reflection. That's in the movie. Like everything she told him, he used as a scare tactic in this film. And what a genius idea, because I think it's brilliant for a filmmaker to admit when they don't know. I don't know what's scary. I don't know what is going to click with a younger audience because let's face it, I'm older. So what he did was he asked somebody of youth, what scares you? And that's what he tries to deliver with this film. And, you know, cool enough, this was a very, very big hit with the youth audience when it came out in the late 70s, and thus has become a huge cult film among weird psychedelic horror fans around the world, and me included. I love this movie. I think this is a fucking absolute acid trip. But I always thought it was so interesting, the story of coming to be, and that Toho didn't want anything to do with him, and that Toho really needed a hit. And here comes this filmmaker, Mr. Obayashi, and he just absolutely changed the game for haunted house movies. This is completely different than any other templated haunted house movie. And what I think is the most brilliant thing about this is that he uses every single trick in the book. He uses every single type of filmmaking, every single type of special effect that you can use and throw at the fan, because this is an experimental film, but it's an experimental film that somehow, some way, all kind of flows together. Even though it's all over the place, it's still perfect as is. And I mean, there's so many great things about this. And on the back here, it says, Obayashi used Mate's animation, collage effects. He also uses these amazing painted backgrounds to create a false sense of verisimilitude where, you know, you'll have these girls, they're outside, and you'll have this beautiful fucking backdrop. And if you look closely enough, especially on a high definition Blu-ray, you could tell it's a painted background. But it's gorgeous to look at. And all the special makeup effects he's able to use here. The animation of them, the girls on the train, and some of the filmmaking styles of when we get into the story. They're just unbelievably incredible and innovative and really, I think, ambitious. I admire this film so much for all that it tries. And, you know, even if somebody watched this and went, you know, that didn't make any sense. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of people like that. It's not the point. It's just, it's a grand film. It's got everything in it. It's got laughs. It's got cool characters. It's got fun dialogue. It's got every single trick in the book. And it's a quick time, 88 minutes. You're in, you're out, you're done. I think the world of this movie. I really do. I really like House from 1977. And I get a little bit into the story. So basically, you follow our lead character. Her name is Gorgeous. Yes, I'm not kidding you. All of the main characters, the girls, the 7 girls in this, are named after attributes. One is called Mac. She likes to eat. One is called Kung Fu. She's a fucking Kung Fu master. I shit you not. That's the character's name, is Kung Fu. And of course, Gorgeous is the most pretty of the bunch. She's our lead. And we follow her as she goes home from school one day and she sees her father has moved on from her mother, who has passed away years ago. And he says, listen, you know, I found a woman I've fallen in love with. I'd like you to give her a chance. Gorgeous doesn't want to do that. And she kind of rebels and says, hey, I want to visit my mother's sister, my aunt. And she writes her, hey, could me and my friends, could we come visit? I don't want to be at home right now. I don't want to be reminded of home. The aunt the next day sends the letter back. Yeah, sure. Come. So her and the 7 friends, and it's funny, they use 7 because in Japanese culture, that's really the big thing, whether it be the 7 seals, whether it be the 7 samurai. Of course, you know, he wanted to pay homage to those films that he loved and other films that were very ambitious at their time. So he said, screw it. They did 7. I'm doing 7. And screw it. Where Toho didn't want to work with me and didn't think I was worth a damn, I'm going to take the 7 women that I've been shooting commercials with over the past 10 years and put them all in this movie as the stars. Really cool stuff for actresses who had not gotten that cinematic try. And here, all 7 of them get their own chance. And I think that's another really cool thing, that he didn't turn his back and, you know, walk away from the people that helped him get to where he got to. He instead called them in and said, hey, we're doing this together. If we sink, we're sinking together. And if we rise to the top, we're rising to the top together. And I like that. I really do appreciate that. Of course, on the train, you hear the story of the aunt and how her lover, he went off to the war, World War II, of course, and she's waiting for him to come back so they can get married. And of course, he never returns. Thus, she is this old, weak, wheelchair-bound woman. And through these new girls coming into her house, she starts to, in ways, feed upon their youth so she can be reborn and continue to wait for her lover to come home. Really maniacal little plot there for the aunt, but a fun setup, a really fun setup. And where this film has similar means, and this, by the way, this one came first. This one is of course, there's feeding off of the energy of the new young people in the house or whatever. But this one is very much more fun about it as opposed to horrific about it. Like Max, she's eating everything in the house. And then one day, of course, she goes out to pick up the watermelon that's in the well. And we hear a scream. We don't know what happened. Gorgeous comes outside. She's like, what the hell happened to Max? So she's pulling up the thing. And of course, it's fucking Max's decapitated head. And the decapitated head flies around her, bites her on the ass, and, then we're off. I mean, it takes a little while to get the pace going and the ball rolling, but once it does, man, this is I repeat, the acid trip horror film. It really is. This is a wild movie. This is a movie where a woman gets attacked by mattresses and fucking almost killed by mattresses. This is a movie where the paintings spit out blood from the wall. This is a movie where this one girl, she's playing the piano and all this kind of happy-go-lucky feeling. All of a sudden, the piano bites her fucking fingers off and consumes this girl. And there's these great visuals of this girl trying to push out of the piano wire and getting cuts and all this shit. Really, really fantastic visuals. I mean, fantastic stuff. And very creative, and I think that was the director, Mr. Obayashi. I think that was his best, idea, was to admit that he didn't know, like I was saying before, and really kind of just go batshit with it and listen to his daughter. Okay, you find this scary? I'm going to put this in the film because I don't know what the fuck kids are going to find scary. So he listened to youth, and in turn, youth really kind of were drawn to this movie. And it's incredible. It really is incredible, the type of, long-lasting feels that this movie has had in the community. I know some famous people that put this movie way over. People like Bill Hader. There's actually, I don't know if people watch the Criterion Closets, when you get these actors and actresses to go into the Criterion collection and pick some of their favorite Criterion movies. He actually had this shirt on and took this Blu-ray and said, this is one of the craziest movies I've ever seen. And of course, he saw it at the IFC Center too. Probably not the same night as me, but still really small world, because of course he was on SNL for years. And of course, he saw this at a midnight screening just like I did. And was just absolutely enamored by the film. It really is an enamoring movie for sure. Fever Dream House. Yes, House is a fever dream, AJ. I agree. It is one of the most insane movies I've ever seen in my life. It's up there. Oh, I've never seen the foreign house, only the American House of the Soldier. Well, Mr. Soulless Trenchcoat, we're going to be talking about that tonight too, so do not worry. That's one of my favorites as well. It is really dope. I liked the story to this. Almost bought the house on Criterion sale. Maybe next time. I went with Silence of the Lambs and Sisters by Brian De Palma. I have the Sisters, Brian De Palma. Really good movie. Really good movie. I don't even know if that would be more horror, or that's a true experimental film, but you see a lot of De Palma does the split screen in that. Margot Kidder's fucking terrifying. That's a really good little movie. Sisters. That's a good Criterion Blue too. Fucking amazing transfer. And thank you for showing up, and Mr. Eric. Hey, Internet, it's Eric here. Mr. Eric, cheers to you, my friend. We're drinking grape juice tonight on the Graveyard. What are you drinking, brother? But this is just, it's wild. It really, truly is wild. And every time I watch it, it puts a smile on my face. And I really like the music in the film. It sort of plays throughout. There's not many scenes where you get that silence factor. Like, you get a lot of music throughout a lot of this film. And It's wild. You would have thought this movie had millions and millions of dollars when it comes to a budget, but this was actually a fairly low budget film because Toho had no fucking faith in it. And when it was released, it became a very big hit. And another thing I thought was interesting about this, they initially, before he started filming, they were like, listen, Jaws was a really big hit in America. We want this to be the Japanese version of Jaws. Thus, why, in my opinion, this is the only reason, in my opinion, this is the case. This cover, I really wonder if that was more Toho than, the director. I really think that they wanted this to look like, on paper, maybe a killer animal film. And of course, Obayashi, he was not a fan of some of the American ripoffs of Jaws, whether it be William Girdler's Grizzly or Alligator or Orca. He said that those were like lesser imitations, and that's what they really initially Toho wanted him to do. They were like, rip off Jaws, however you want to do it. And he said, I'll have an animal in there, but I'm not doing that, and he gives us this great, memorable, fun haunted house movie. But it's funny, he when he was told that, he was like not interested in doing that. And I appreciate that, because if he had just made another creature feature trying to rip off Jaws, that's exactly what we would remember it as. Instead, we remember it as this fucking absolute acid trip of a movie. And like the back of it says, like an episode of Scooby-Doo directed by Mario Bava. And it's so true. It's very colorful. It's very vibrant. It's very trippy. There's a lot of shit where you're like, Jesus, that doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of randomness. There's scenes where, some of the girls will be in the house. One of them's having a bad dream, and she dreams eating a watermelon with this random man and a fucking bear. That happens in this movie, fucking randomly. Like, it has some random cuts, but I don't know, man. I think this is just a really cool experiment in the horror genre. And I always thought the world of this movie. I really like this one. I highly recommend you see this if you haven't. Batshit, but the best batshit crazy you can get, because it's a filmmaker that held nothing back, showed all the ambition, and really took notes from the younger generation to appease the younger generation. And he was able to do that with this movie right here. And this movie, dare I say, it stood the grand test of time, because we're still talking about it all these years later. And, I actually would really like to see a lot more from this filmmaker. I think he delved a lot more into different other genres, but this one right here, man, it takes the fucking cake to me. It's a really, really cool little haunted house movie. House, I would give this a solid 8.5 out of 10. Love this movie. Highly recommend. So moving on, though, into our next film of the evening.